Okay, so now to work the autoclave portion of the checkoff, as soon as you finish wrapping your 2 items, and again, you'll have 1 pouch and 1 pack, whatever the items are that I gave you, you'll bring them right over to the autoclave, and this is the autoclave that we're going to use for the checkoff. This particular autoclave doesn't really work anymore. Students were burning themselves on there, so you're going to have to talk through this portion of the checkoff. So that's what I'm going to do exactly the way that you will need to do it for the autoclave. If you don't talk through a portion, I may ask you a question. So the more you tell me during this portion, the better off that you'll really be. So as you come over to the autoclave with your 2 items, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to check the water level. In this particular autoclave, there's a lid over here on the side, and you'll look up and you'll look in to see if the water level is full. Now, like I said, this autoclave is not operational, so there is a line on the side etched in, and later I'll have each of you come around individually so you can see the line on both this older autoclave and the newer model, so you can see where that fill line is located. The autoclave should be filled with distilled water. Not regular tap water, not sterile water, but distilled water. Distilled water has all the minerals taken out, so as evaporation occurs, minerals aren't left behind and cloud up the inner workings of your autoclave, okay? So first thing you do is come over and you're going to check the water level. If it's not to the fill line, then you're going to add distilled water. That's what I need you to tell me when we do this checkoff, okay? Water level looks okay is what you're going to tell me, because like I said, there's no real water in here. You just have to verbalize that you checked the water level. Then you're going to take the tray and you're going to load your instruments in the autoclave, and you need to tell me they would be loaded 1, 2, 3 inches apart. There should be 1 to 3 inches of space between each of your items. They shouldn't be stacked on top of each other. Now in this particular case, I have my mosquito forceps, which I can put on one end, and then my tissue forceps I can put over here, and there's a little bit of overlapping. I'm going to turn this sideways. There's a little bit of overlapping where there's nothing in this pouch, and that's okay. Okay? But technically, per the textbook, everything should have 1 to 3 inches around it. That includes front, side, back, instruments, etc. Some autoclaves, like these newer ones I'll show you, have multi-levels, multiple trays that go in, and that's okay too. Then you load each tray, and everything needs to have 1 to 3 inches between it for proper sterilization. Okay? So I've checked the water level, I've loaded my autoclave. The next thing I'm going to do is over here on this bottom dial, you need to be really careful, so you may want to look at this real close. This bottom dial has a white line. It's kind of a little dial, and one half of it has a white line. That's the side that we want to pay special attention to. Right now it is set to off because it's at the bottom. See this little white line there? Okay. So once I have my items loaded into the autoclave, I want to turn that dial to fill. So it's a quarter turn to the right, and it says fill. What's going to happen is the water that's in this outer chamber that I just checked is going to start to come into the inside of my autoclave. If you look inside this autoclave, it's kind of like a round tunnel. There's water in the outside. There's 2 separate chambers. The water is in that outer chamber that's in the box. And then there's an opening in the back where once I turn that to fill, it allows it to come into this inner chamber. And you have to look real close. Down here at the bottom, there is a plate, and it says to fill cover plate. Can you see that plate good, Sarah? So it's a little plate. As soon as water starts to come over that plate, then you're going to close and lock the autoclave. So since there's no real water in here, what you're going to say to me is I'm going to turn the dial to fill, physically do turn that dial to fill. Then you're going to tell me I'm going to wait until the water hits this fill plate, and you're going to point that fill plate out to me. When it does that, then I'm going to close and lock the autoclave. That's what you're going to say to me. Make sure you get some hands-on with this handle because it can be very sticky. Okay, if you pull too hard, it's not going to go. So you have to kind of have a gentle touch and make sure you lock it. Locking it means that this handle is all the way down. This is not locked. That is locked. Okay? Okay, so turn it to fill. Wait till the water hits that fill plate. Close and lock the door. As soon as you lock that door, then you're going to physically turn that dial to sterilize, which is at the top of this dial. So another quarter turn will turn it to sterilize. What that does is it basically turns the autoclave on. It's kind of like turning that pot of spaghetti on. Now you've turned the burner on to get things to start cooking. Because that's basically what this is a pressure cooker. Okay? So you're going to turn it to sterilize, and then you're going to start watching this pressure. This is the pressure gauge, and this is the temperature gauge. You turn it to sterilize, and you wait for the temperature to reach 270 degrees. That's your key number there, 270 degrees. And you have to wait until the pressure gauge has reached 15 pounds of pressure. So I'm going to turn it to sterilize. I'm going to wait until my temperature reaches 270 degrees and my pressure has reached 15 pounds of pressure. I have to wait until both of those things have happened, and then I'm going to set my timer to 15 minutes. This top dial is your timer, and I need to see you set it over here to 15 minutes. But not until after you've told me that the temperature is 270 and the pressure is 15 pounds. Now I set my timer to 15 minutes. My timer goes off. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the dial to vent. Another quarter turn to vent. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the temperature and the pressure to start to drop. When you turn that in a real autoclave, it'll start to steam. Okay? Because it's like opening it up, turning the oven off, and now it's all boiling and everything. It's done cooking, so now I've just turned it off so that temperature is going back down to 0. Does that make sense? Okay? So once I turn this to vent and my temperature and my pressure have both reached 0, so I got to wait until that happens, so I got to watch my dials. Once my temperature and my pressure have reached 0, then I'm going to unlock and open the door 1 inch. Don't open the door a whole lot. If you open it a lot, it's like opening the door in a steamy shower. Condensation happens and you start getting those run marks on the mirror, right, in a shower. If we do that, it's going to make our packages real wet. We want it to dry slowly, not quickly. The cool air out here with the warm air in there will cause condensation and it will make our items wet. Okay? So everything went back down to 0. I opened my door, I unlocked and opened my door 1 inch. Now I need to set the timer to dry. So I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes again. I made it nice and easy for you, made it all 15 minutes. So once I have that door open, now I'm going to set my timer to 15 minutes. I wait until that timer goes off. This is a crucial step that sometimes students mess up. Once that timer goes off, then you physically have to go to the other room and wash your hands. Don't say, I set my timer and I'm going to go wash my hands. Okay? So wait until your timer goes off, then come back with clean, dry hands. And I will look at your hands. If I see moisture on your hands, I will not pass you. Because moisture will penetrate the package and then it becomes unsterile. Okay? After the timer goes off, I go to the other room, I wash and dry my hands, then I can come back and I'm going to unload the instruments, which are now sterile. Make sure your hands are dry because, like I said, I'll look at those wrists and everything. Now I may ask you a question at this point. You unloaded your instruments and I want to know what you should do with these. Now the outsides, once I touch them, the outsides are no longer sterile, but the insides of the package are. And they need to be stored in a clean, dry place. So in like a cabinet or in a drawer, something of that nature in your office. Not near water, not next to the sink. Okay? Clean, dry place. And then I also might ask you, if you don't tell me, how long are they good for? And they're good for 90 days. That's why we put the date on the label. If the sterility has not been compromised, they're good for 90 days. So 90 days goes by and we didn't use this tissue forceps, guess what? We got to open the package and re-sterilize it anyway. Sterilization is only good from 90 days from the date that it was sterilized. Now, in some cases, if you have a surgical pack like we looked at, and it has a dust cover on it, then it can be good for up to 6 months. But that's kind of a special situation. Typical items that you're going to use in the office, you know, on a fairly regular basis are good for 90 days. Stored in a clean, dry place. Then the last step to this checkoff, so you verbalize that to me. Now I'm going to unload my instruments, I'm going to store them in a clean, dry place, and they're good for up to 90 days. And the last thing that you need to do then is document. There's an autoclave log sheet that will be on top of the autoclave, and you need to fill out the documentation as appropriate. Now, typically, the first couple of lines you're going to document when you put the load in, and the last couple of lines you won't document until you remove the items. But for our situation, since we're not actually running the autoclave, you're just going to fill the whole line out. Okay? So what are on the lines? The first line says action. So on the action line, you can put ran autoclave, ran load, something that is appropriate such as that. The next line has the date, so the date that you ran the autoclave, and then the time and your initials. So when you run a load in the autoclave, those are the things that you'll fill in to start with. And then when you take the items out of the autoclave, you'll start with the column that says results. So what were the results? Everything was fine. Load ran okay. Successful, good, anything along those lines. And then your date and initials again, and that basically indicates that's the person who took the items out of the autoclave. Because when you work in the office, I might load it, Melissa might unload it. Jody might load it, and, you know, Gigi might unload it. Okay? So that's what the documentation portion is. But you, when you do your checkoff, you are going to put ran load, today's date, the time, your initials, successful or good in the result column, the same date, and your same initials, just because that's how this is going to play. Okay, and then you're going to give that documentation to me, and then your checkoff will be over. Okay, any questions?